Hi, and welcome to my video about how to create a multi-layered passwordless break glass alternative. Emergency accounts are a fundamental part of any security strategy. They are used to access systems when their primary account is unavailable or locked out. Think about your global admin with multi-factor authentication, of course. You have conditional access policies configured, and for some kind of reason the policies are not working, or you have created a too restrictive policy that you have locked out yourself. In that case, we are using emergency accounts or break glass accounts. The thing about that account is they are very high privileged, and they have a very long complex password, but it's just a password with no MFA at all. So if someone is capturing that password and they have your emergency account, then they still can log in. It's not very secure from my opinion. So what I did is to create some kind of environment with a multi-layer authentication and with no password. So what's the idea? The idea is to log in with a service principal. That's an app registration in a tenant, and that app registration has some permissions. When using the service principal, you have two options. There's using an app secret, which is also a long password, or using a client certificate. So what I do in this situation is using the app secret ID in combination with the client secret, or with the client certificate, I must say. So in the case of an emergency, we can log in with that service principal and using that certificate to log in. Then you should say, all right, when I give that service principal global admin permissions or other permissions to disable MFA or so, then we are fine. Yeah, that's true, but I want to have a multi-layered situation. So what I did is I give the service principal the least permissions to just add a user to a group. So if someone has your client certificate and your service principal ID, they can log in, but the only thing they can do is adding users to a group. Well, that's not a very big security thing, because of they don't know which group they are available and which users to add. So that's the first point of my solution. And the second part of that is I have a group, that's an Azure AD group, which is empty by default, and that group is assigned to the MFA policies as an exclusion. So when there is a situation you have to log in with the break glass account, in the case the service principal, then the only thing you need to do is add users to that exclusion group. Well, if someone does have your service principal and your client secret, they also have to know the user ID from the user you would like to add, and also the group ID for the group to add the users to. So in the first step we have a password situation, and in the second step, the second layer, is you still don't have the IDs to add users to MFA exclusions. The next step is to create a app registration and assign a certificate to it. With the app registration and the certificate, we are able to log in. The first step is to create a certificate that we will upload later. To create a certificate, I use a self-signed certificate, which I created with OpenSSL. OpenSSL is a tool that's default available on macOS, which I use. Windows For Windows you have to install it. Of course there are also other tools to create self-signed certificates, but for me this is the most simple way. Creating a self-signed certificate has 4 steps in these. First of all, I create a key file that holds the private key. Very simple. By filling in the password 2 times. The next step is to create a certificate request file, also with the key file in it. So what I do is to open the key file and then I create a certificate request, country name. Not everything is needed, so I just fill in some values, but this can be anything. And that's it. Now I have a certificate request file and the key file. Now the next step is to create the certificate file itself without a private key. This is the file that I upload later in the app registration. In this command I also give the key file and my request file, and the output is the CRT file. So I fill in the password again, and now I also have the CRT file. The last step in these is to create the PFX file. The PFX file, that's the certificate file including the key file. So that's the bundled file that holds the private key. The PFX file is the file which I need to use to log in later. This is not the file that is uploaded to the application. So what I do is this one. Also fill in the password. If I want to export it later to a certificate file, then I need a password again. So also that is filled in. And for now, I do have 4 files. They're in my Finder now on this location. Then the next step is going to the portal. Go to Active Directory and then App Registrations. I click on New Registration and choose a proper name. Emergent. Fill in the name and register the application. Then I go to Certificates and Secrets. Choose the Certificates tab, and from there I'm able to upload it. As the mention says, there are 3 types of which are supported. I choose the CRT file and uploaded it. So what I did now is I created an app registration and I have a certificate file connected. For now I am able to log in by providing the service principal ID, including the certificate file, including the password for the certificate. But I don't have permissions yet. So the next step is to create, to assign the proper permissions for doing my actions later on. And for that I go to API permissions, then click on the add permissions. To assign users to a group, several permissions are available. We have the group read-write permissions, and we have the role membership permissions. I will choose the last one because of later on we will create a role assignable group in Azure AD, and if you want to assign users to that group, then you need some extra permissions for that. So that's the reason why I choose that type of permission. To do that I use the Microsoft Graph, and from there I have the delegated permissions and application permissions. There's a big difference between that. where the delegated permissions are used for when you have a user that is signed in. I use the application permissions because I sign in as a service principal. From there, I use the role management, and then I have to read write directory, assign it, and then last step is to consent it based on my account. So the app is now able to do some write actions at my Azure AD role assignable group when I'm logged in. So that's the application part where I created a certificate file first. In the end I have two files, a CRT file that is uploaded to the application. I do have a PFX file that holds the private key. That's the file which I need to log in from my command line, which I will show in the next step. Then we have created an app registration using the new registration pane. We have uploaded the certificate to it, and that's it. Okay, the next step is to create a Azure AD group that is assigned to conditional access policies, which are for exclusions. To create an Azure AD group, we go to the Entra portal, entra.microsoft.com, and we select the identity menu blade, and from there we are going to groups. From there I click on all groups, and there we are able to create a new group. First of all, we create a group name, exclude from MFA. And the next option is to make it able to assign Azure AD roles to this group. We are not assigning Azure AD roles to this group, but I will select it. I will select this is possible. This has, for me, two important reasons. The first reason is the membership type. The type must be assigned. That makes sure that I'm only able to assign users to this group by selecting them and not by a dynamic query like other groups have, dynamic user or dynamic device. If you select one of those, you're able to create a query, and that query assign user or devices to a group automatically. I want to avoid that because it's only needed in the case of an emergency, and I want to avoid that a faulty query assign all my devices to that group. So I click yes. And another big reason is if a group has this type, only global administrators or privileged identity role administrators can assign users to this group. So there's no service desk user or anyone else that can assign users to this group, and that's the most important reason. So if you are a group administrator, which is a service desk user that can manage all groups with memberships and all of that, this group, they are not able to add users to this group. So low levels of less privileged users cannot assign users to this group. But our just created application is not a PIM admin or a global admin, so we have to find a way to allow that user, that service principal, to add users to this group. There is a way by selecting him as of the service principal as a owner. So what I do is I want to add the owners. I will search for my service principal and I will add it as an owner, and that's it. So I created a security group with a name. I allowed it to add Azure AD rules to this group. I'm not adding roles to the group and I'm not adding members to this group. Only thing I did was adding an owner to the group, and that owner is also beside the global admins, beside the PIM administrators, to add users to the group. Then I will create the group. That's it. Then the next step is go to protection and then find the conditional access policy. I created one that requires MFA for all users. I click on the user assignment part, click on exclude, and from there I can exclude the groups or users. Exclude from MFA. I'm not assigning myself also as an exclusion from MFA because I have MFA, of course. So I do understand that the policy is not excluding myself as user. I will save it, and now we have the group assigned to the conditional access policy. Now we have all parts in place. We have created a service principal, we have created a certificate to log in, we have created a group, we have created we assigned the service principal as an owner to the group, so he's allowed to assign users to that group. The last step is to log in as a service principal in the case of an emergency, and add a user to the created group. The first step is to connect to Azure. In this case, I use the connect AZ account command in PowerShell. I tell the command I log in as a service principal. I'm using the application ID. The application ID is the ID which I created in earlier steps. So when I go to applications and I use the emergency account application, there you will see the application client ID. That's the client ID which I need to use. The next part is to provide the certificate file with the private key. I will also provide my tenant because the app does not know which tenant it is, so I have to provide the tenant where the app lives. And the last step is to provide the password as a secure string, which is provided over here. So I created my typed in password, which is the key that I filled in earlier steps. I converted to a secure string, and from there I log into to Azure. So that's what I do now. And now I'm logged in. From there I create a header with a token for the Graph API. I'm using the get AZ access token with the resource for graph microsoft.com. I will grab the token from there. And then the next step is to go to the group and assign a user to it. Well, the URL for that is to graphmicrosoft.com/groups, and this is the group ID from the group which I created. So when I go back to the Enter portal, choose all groups, I will search for the exclude group which I created, exclude from MFA, and this is the object ID from the group. If I go there, there are no users, no members in it, so that's the next step we will do. Then I provide a body to the Graph API that tells that which directory object must be assigned to the group. And that's the directory object. In my case, is this a user account? That's what I want to assign to the group. And the last step is to send the whole body to the URL with a header. So that's what I'm going to do now. And it says 204, no content. It means there are no errors. This is the response I was expecting. Now the portal is a bit behind, so we have to refresh a couple of times. Still not there. Total refresh. This is what it's called portal magic. Members, and there he is. Well, let's start a guest portal to portaloffice.com. There I will fill in my email address, my password, and there I'm in without MFA. Well, if I close the portal now, I will remove myself from the group. That's not what I meant. User is removed. Let's wait a few minutes to make sure he's removed definitely from the group. Yep, it's gone now, no members at all. Then I will go back to the guest browser, go back with my email address, copy my password again, and there my MFA is back. And now I have to use MFA again. So what we did at all is incomplete is we have created an app registration. We have, if I go back to that, we have an emergency account, app registration. We have assigned the certificate. We have added the role management permissions to assign users to a Azure AD role assignable group, which is normally only available for global admins and PIM administrators, but because of we have created a group with also the service principal as a owner of the group, he's also able to assign users to the group. And in the last step, we have assigned that group to the conditional access policy that enforces MFA. By adding the group, users to this group, users are free to not use MFA. So when the MFA services became unavailable, or you have locked out yourself, what else? Then in the back, we have to connect with the service principal including the certificate, including the password of the certificate, including the tenant ID. Then we have to create a graph header to get the correct access token for graph. And then we need the group URL with the group ID. So make sure if you implement this solution, you always write down somewhere the group ID. So if someone captures your service principal, including your certificate, including the password which is at the certificate, and they can log in, they still don't know which groups there are, which users are must be assigned to the group. So if you write down the group ID, then you know which group is excluded, and from there you can assign users to the group. Just make sure you also write down the group IDs, mostly one or two admins in the tenant. They can log in without MFA, and from there you can configure all that is needed. So that's the solution for creating a break class account, multi-layered, without just one password. You just have to know a few things before you can disable MFA for a tenant. I think it's a very secure solution and still workable. So yeah, I want to thank you for showing this video. If you have any feedback, comments or questions, please let me know. I will come back to you later. I also have written a blog about this solution that is available at my website. This is the complete URL, rozemuller.com. But if you look for password multi-layered, then you will find it on my website. Again, thank you, and hope to see you again. Bye.